Imagine a world without Hollywood, without Silicon Valley, without the skyscrapers of New York. A world not dominated by the dollar, and where no single superpower dictates the rules of international trade and geopolitics. This is the biggest hypothetical question in alternative history that we explore today on BT+. What if the United States of America never existed? The absence of America does not just mean changing the name of a country. It means rewriting global history from its roots. Today, we will delve into a detailed analysis of the impact of this absence on geopolitics, the economy, major wars, and global culture. Part 1. The map of the missing continent. In this scenario, the 13 colonies failed to pass the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Without the American Revolution, the colonies on the East Coast would remain under direct British Crown rule. The region would likely evolve into something resembling Greater Canada, but with a larger population and significantly less autonomy in the early stages. British expansion westward would be slower and more organized, facing greater resistance from Native American tribes who would not encounter a large, unified pressure from a single entity. The vast lands of the Midwest and Great Plains would remain contested for a much longer period. The legal and political system would remain closer to the British monarchical and parliamentary model, with a complete absence of concepts like the right to bear arms and the extreme individualism that characterize the American identity. One of the largest geographical changes is the fate of the Southwestern territories. No Mexican-American War. The absence of the U.S. prevents the Mexican-American War from occurring. Mexico would retain huge, resource-rich states that today include Texas, California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. This Greater Mexico would be a formidable regional power, perhaps succeeding in attracting some of the European immigration, becoming a powerful, hybrid nation with significant economic influence, instead of the economically dependent southern neighbor it is today. Instead of one superpower, we would have a continent divided between an extended British Empire, a massive Mexico, and perhaps remnants of French or Spanish influence, making the world in the 19th century much more multipolar regionally. Part 2. World Wars and the Balance of Power. The absence of the United States fundamentally changes the course of the world wars, especially its role as a decisive intervening power and the arsenal of democracy. America's late entry in 1917 was crucial in tipping the scales in favor of the exhausted Allies. Without this intervention, the war would likely have lasted much longer or ended in a negotiated settlement that left Germany stronger, potentially allowing other military nationalist states to rise. There would be no Wall Street and number 1929 crash as we know it, but a global depression would still hit Europe hard due to massive debts and industrial stagnation. This is the most critical and dangerous scenario. Fall of Britain. The absence of massive U.S. support to Britain in the early days of the war would make the survival of the British Empire against the Nazi war machine highly questionable. London might have fallen or been forced to negotiate a truce. A costlier Soviet victory. The Soviet Union would be the only power capable of confronting the Nazi war machine long-term. But without vital American supplies, the Soviet cost would be far higher than 27 million dead, potentially leading to a collapse of the Eastern Front under more difficult circumstances. The fate of Japan. The absence of the American nuclear project means no atomic bomb. The war in the Pacific would drag on for additional years, incurring devastating casualties, potentially ending only with a costly conventional invasion by joint forces. Dominance of the Eastern Bloc. Following the war, assuming an Allied victory, the world would witness the undisputed dominance of the Soviet Union. A unipolar world, there would be no major balancing power. Eastern Europe would be fully and deeply integrated into the communist bloc, which could expand into Asia and Africa at a faster pace, free from geopolitical constraints. No NATO. There would be no North Atlantic Treaty Organization, leaving Western Europe exposed and vulnerable, likely pushing them towards enforced neutrality or falling under direct Soviet pressure. Part 3. Economy, Innovation, and Global Leadership. The impact of the largest economy's absence is not limited to military matters, but extends to the fabric of daily life. No Bretton Woods system. There would be no Bretton Woods Conference after World War II, which established the dollar as the world's reserve currency and paved the way for the creation of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The dominant currency would likely be the British pound sterling for a longer period, or perhaps the German mark/Japanese yen, or even the Soviet ruble under Eastern Bloc hegemony. The global trade system would be more fragmented and less fluid. Delayed globalization. Without the American logistical and financial muscle to enforce free trade agreements, globalization would be delayed by decades, or take a completely different form focused on regional continental blocks. The most significant modern innovations are directly linked to the American capitalist environment and government funding. Delayed digital revolution. Companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Tesla would not exist. More importantly, the internet itself would be delayed or emerge from European or Japanese laboratories, but at a much slower pace, leading to a significant global technological lag. Space. The absence of the Apollo program means no moon landing. The space race would be limited to a competition between the Soviet Union and European powers. Part 4. Culture, values, and global identity. The absence of America means the absence of Americanization, the most influential cultural force of the last 2 centuries. Dominance of European and Eastern culture, art and cinema. Hollywood would never become the global dream factory. European and Japanese cinema would dominate the global narrative. Music, the absence of jazz, rock and roll, and modern pop genres as we know them. Musical trends would remain closer to European classics or local folklore. Concepts of liberty and democracy. With all its contradictions, America was the primary promoter and publisher of the idea of liberal democracy and universal human rights. Its absence leaves a large void, making the concepts of self-governance and individual liberty vulnerable to authoritarian powers. Conclusion: a more peaceful or a more authoritarian world. The summary is that a world without the United States would be more socialist or communist, with widespread Soviet hegemony. Technologically slower, especially in the fields of the internet and computing. Culturally more European, with British/French cultural dominance. Some might argue that this world would be more peaceful because it lacks the American military interventions that the Middle East and Latin America have endured. However, others believe it would be a more authoritarian and darker world, where democratic powers lack their main pillar of support and deterrence against totalitarian forces and tyranny. This alternative world is not necessarily a better one. It is simply a radically different one, a world governed by conflict between immense European powers and an unchecked communist bloc. We hope you enjoyed this journey through alternative history. Don't forget to subscribe to BT Plus for more stories and analyses that transcend the limits of reality.